Okay, so to start off with, before we even get started with doing anything in Photoshop, I want you to be on your desktop screen. You can see my lovely pup Sully and my handsome husband Casey. And what we want to make sure that we do here is we're just going to make a folder where we are going to store all of our stuff, which means that you have to be comfortable with where you're sitting right now. Because we are going to save everything to our desktop, so that means you have to use the same computer every day, which shouldn't be a problem. Just remember that that's what you're going to have to do. So again, to make a folder on your desktop, you right click, go to File, New, and then Folder. I'm just going to name mine Web 1 because that's what we're in. And then go ahead and click into the folder. And in here, we're going to make two folders. One for our lessons. Up at the very top, you're going to see a button for a new folder. Go ahead and click on that. Just type in Lessons. And we're going to make another one and call it Assignments. So in case you aren't aware, your PLDs do not have Photoshop on it, so you are going to have to use the machines in C39 because your PLDs are not strong enough to run Photoshop. So that's why we have to use this. So this is going to be where we're going to save everything to. So you can go ahead and minimize this. Now let's go ahead and get Photoshop open. I have mine pinned to my taskbar. You guys might not, so you might have to hit your start menu. And if you don't see it, just scroll down and then move over. Oh, no, it doesn't want to go. Go figure. I'm going to use my scroll bar here. Go until you find it. Where'd you go here? Photoshop. Clearly you can tell I don't usually do it this way because it's just, there it is. Because I always have it pinned because that's the easiest thing to do. So once you have it popped up and it loads, it might take a little bit of time. It's a very strong program. Once you have it popped up, I guess maybe you can't see this right now, but down on your taskbar, if you right click on the little icon, you can say pin to taskbar, and I would recommend doing that just because then it's easy to get to all the time. Because not all of the images that we're going to open are Photoshop files, so they might open in like the image viewer, and you want it to open in Photoshop. So I would do it that way, but that's just my personal opinion. So once you have Photoshop up and running, the next thing I'm going to show you is where you're going to need to go to download the files needed for our lesson. So the easiest place for me to put these is in our Google Classroom. Now, I haven't released them yet as of right now for you guys, but I can show you where they're going to be. And they'll just be in our stream like normal. So when you come here, I'll open this up and it'll look like this. And you'll have these different options for files that we're going to use throughout this lesson. All you have to do is click on it and it will open in this window. And then notice that over here, there's these little three dots. It'll say more actions. It's going to have you open in a new window. And I know that's kind of annoying, but it is the easiest way for you to get these. And so then what you can do is actually hit the download button here, and this will download. And when you click on it, this happens to be a Photoshop file, so it will open automatically into Photoshop. So just as a reminder, these are going to be in Classroom, even if you don't see them right now, and it might look just a tish different because it's from my view instead of from yours. You just have to click on PSA1, which just stands for Photoshop A1. Go ahead and click on that guy. Hit the three little dots. Open in a new window. And then hit the download button. And it will open in Photoshop looking like this. So hopefully, I'm going to just pause the video here and hope that that worked out for you guys okay, and then we'll get back at it here in a second. Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about the Photoshop workspace for those of you who may not be familiar with Photoshop or have never worked with it before. So Photoshop is a photo editing software, and in a nutshell, what Photoshop gives us is a ton of tools, commands, and panels that allows us to edit and manipulate digital images. Now, digital images are the ones that you can get from a digital camera. You can scan in a photograph, or you can create an image from scratch. Okay. Most of the time, what we are working with are images that are made up of something called bitmap graphics. And what that means is that bitmap graphics use pixels. So I'm sure you've heard of pixels before. Pixels are essentially little colored squares that are so small that your eye can't even see them. But when you zoom in and look, you'll see these individual little squares, but when you're zoomed out like we are now, what you see is the whole image, which is kind of cool when you think about it. So Photoshop has tons of different tools, like I said, and we're going to sort of work our way through all of those tools as we go throughout our Photoshop unit, which will take most of the first part of our class. So when it comes to starting our Photoshop and getting a graphic in here, what you see with this big kind of darker gray area, we refer to that as the workspace. You're going to notice that up here we have our menu bar that goes across the top. And then right underneath that, what we call the options bar. This options bar is going to change based on what kind of tool you have selected. So I just click the move tool and notice how our options bar changed. If I click on the paint bucket tool, our options bar changes. So depending on the tool that you have selected from our tools panel on the left hand side, your options bar is going to change. Right underneath that, you're going to see that we have a little file tab, and all that is showing us what the file name and specifics about the image that we have pulled up are. So remember, we had downloaded PSA1, so that's just indicating that that's what that is there. I also have my rulers turned on. I use my rulers all the time. That is under the View tab. So if you click on the View tab and go down to your rulers, you can either turn them on or off. Like I said, I like to have my rulers on because I use them all the time. So I'm going to leave them on. I'm going to come over here onto my right hand side. This is called the workspace switcher. You're going to notice that Photoshop has some that are made specifically for the type of work you're doing. Maybe you're doing painting, maybe you're working with photography, maybe you're going to do some 3D stuff. I leave mine on essentials, but this is customizable because you can change it to use the ones that you use most often. So these over here are called panels. You're going to see we have a color panel, a swatches panel. If you click on that, there's adjustments and styles, all things that we're going to talk about as we go here. You might not have a character panel. This one's customized to me. If you don't want to see a panel, if you don't want it to be open, if you double click it, it will close. So you can close all these up. The one panel that we will get into, not really until unit B or C, is your layers panel. And this is what makes Photoshop so powerful, is the ability for us to use layers to build an image. And we're going to talk more about that, so don't worry about that. But a very powerful tool here in Photoshop is our layers panel. So the first thing I kind of want to show you is we've already got our image open in Photoshop, this A1. And the first thing I kind of want to show you is just how to use your zoom and your hand tools. These are tools that we use very frequently. Over on your tools panel, down at the very bottom, you're going to see a magnifying glass and a little hand. The magnifying glass is your zoom tool. So if you go ahead and click on that, you're going to see it gets grayed out. Notice that our options bar up here changes. And when I come out onto my picture, you're going to see that my mouse changes into a little magnifying glass with a plus sign. So I can click and notice that I start to zoom in. Notice though that if I try to move it, it's just zooming in and out. I'm clicking and dragging right now, and what I really want to have happen is I want to move up to the eye, but I can't seem to do that right now. That's why we have something called our move tool or our hand tool. So if you go ahead and click on that, the hand tool allows us to move the image so that we can look at certain spots of it. So what I want you to do is take your zoom tool and zoom in on the eye of this parrot. And keep zooming, keep zooming, keep zooming, and notice, what do you see? Hopefully you answered pixels. You start to see all of these little squares that our eye can't perceive when we're looking at the whole image, but when we zoom in close enough, we see all of these little pixels that are made up of colored squares. Totally cool, makes our image. Now, once we've seen this, we want to zoom back out. So you can do this a couple of ways. You can click up in your options bar. Notice that we have the zoom out button, which is a little magnifying glass with the minus sign going through it. You can click on that and start to zoom out. A fast way to get your whole image back is to actually double click on your hand tool. So I'm just going to double click on my hand tool and it zooms right back out super quick so that I can see my whole image again. When you're in this view, which is also called fit to screen, you can, you can't really move anything. I'm trying to click and drag right now, and I can't because essentially I can see my whole image. But if I start to zoom in at all, oops, I'm still zooming out. Silly me. If I start to zoom back in at all, this is where my hand tool comes in handy and I can move it around and have that option. Okay, so double clicking on the hand tool, fits to screen. We did our zoom tools and our hand tools just now. Okay. If you have any questions about that, try and go ahead and watch the video again if you missed any of that. The next thing that we're going to do is work with saving some of our files. So please go ahead and leave this image up, the A1. Don't close out of that because we're going to need it in the next video.